And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Alright, this has been some time in coming, but I wanted to test these new factions out against each other. What I'm talking about today is the Dungeon Command. I've already done a review on Dungeon Command, and when Dungeon Command came out, there was two different factions. Now there are two more. We have the Curse of Undeath, and we also have the Tyranny of Goblins. Okay, both of these came out in 2012. One came out closer to the summertime, and then the other came out near to the end of the year. But I was able to play them against each other and against the other factions. Now, Dungeon Command for me is a decent game. I enjoy it. My daughter likes it. But I think that it just has its tail kicked by so many other games that do the same thing. Like Summoner Wars and Mage Wars and things like that. Dungeon Command didn't make my top 20 or 30 games of 2012, which is unfortunate. It's an interesting game, but I think it's very forgettable. The best thing I liked about it was the fact that I could use the pieces of it in Wrath of Ashardline and Castle Ravenloft. But these two factions, how have they changed my opinions toward the game? Let's take a look at them, and then we'll be back. Both of these sets can be played on their own, and each set comes with basically half of what you need to play a game. Yeah, granted, you can play a tiny game with everything that comes in one pack, but that's not worth doing. And they also come with their own boards. These boards are, they're different looking, but there's really no new terrain. But hey, variety in the way things look. The game also comes with, and this is, in my opinion, the best part of the game, cards that you can use to use all these figures in Castle Ravenloft, Wrath of Ashardline, and the Legend of Drizzt. At this point in time, there are so many monsters you can use in those games that it's awesome. So, if nothing else, I want Dungeon Command to continue being made so that I can stick those creatures in those games. Each of them comes with two new leaders. I do like this guy who's the leader of the Goblin Horde, in which whenever an enemy creature cowers, they lose one morale. Although I don't use him as much as I use the other guy, Snig the Axe, who can deploy creatures during the refresh phase. This is fantastic, because this guy can get people out at the end of his turn, which is a big deal. He's sticking people out, at the beginning of his turn and at the end of his turn. And so he's putting people out constantly, and it's just a real pain for your opponent, because they're never sure when people are going to come off. As for the I was about to say bad guys, but I guess the goblins aren't very good either. But for the undead, here we have all undead creatures get this a power where I can lose a morale to prevent 20 damage. It's okay. It helps keep your bigger creatures from being destroyed. I'll lose one morale rather than lose the whole giant creature. But I like the other guy better, this Delthrin Everett, because they get one leadership for every enemy creature destroyed during your turn, which is actually pretty devastating against the goblins since they have smaller creatures and are easier to destroy. Speaking of the Goblin Horde, and I really like this troll figure. This is the third time I've seen him now. First I saw him in D&D Miniatures, then he showed up in HeroScape, and now here he is approaching. And speaking of which, come on. Wizards of the Coast, would it kill you to stick... if you're going to stick cards for Wrath of Ashardline in these games, would it kill you to stick HeroScape cards in? Just saying. But anyhow, there's a lot of cool creatures in here, especially these goblins. I like how small the figures for the goblins are. They're very easy to get on the board. And so this is one of the advantages that they have, is being able to get on quickly. And there is some creatures with power. We got your goblin champions and your hobgoblins. And then the bugbear berserker, who's a pretty cool creature. The hobgoblin sorcerer is pretty neat. Probably my favorite is the troll, just because he has that regenerate 10 at the start of your turn. He heals 10 life, so you better kill him as quickly as possible, or he's going to keep nailing on you. And then there's the Horned Devil 2, who has flying and reach 2. Just a pretty powerful creature. The cards that come in the deck, and remember, these cards can be pretty much shuffled between decks, but there are some neat ones that they especially help you get these cards out as fast as you can. That's the whole object of the Goblin Army. So giving you a +1 leadership. Here's one specifically that gives Goblins, Hobgoblins, and Bugbears +10. A reinforcement card, again, to let you get people on the board as fast as possible. And then cards that let you increase their speed or let you shift forward the horde. You can shift some spaces, and so can someone next to you. So cards like that, I think, really help out the Goblins. Then the Undead, which has always been one of my favorite factions and armies. I don't know why, but anyhow. Maybe it's just, I think the idea of skeletons fighting is cool, even if it's physically unsound. But anyway, skeletons are also cheap. They're not as cheap as Goblins to get out, but they have, some cool models. This is the giant bone dragon, but we got some skeletons and then some evil zombies. I do like zombies because when you kill the zombie, he can keep coming back. You can keep paying to put the zombie out. He's not that useful, Vampire Stalker and Gravehound, but it's still nice to have him. The Skeletal Tomb Guardian is just a neat, I love his figure, If you saw a skeleton holding all those swords, would you back up? I would. And he can hit everybody next to him, so very useful. The Skeleton Lancers are really neat. I just like the idea of the Skeletal Lancer. When you kill the Skeletal Lancer, you can immediately deploy a skeleton for free. So essentially, the skeleton who is riding this thing jumps off. That's just a neat concept. Then we have Hypnotic Spirit, which has a really cool model. And let's see what else we got. There's more zombies. The Lich Necromancer, very powerful figure, but not as powerful as the Draco Lich, which can do 3 range attacks. Very powerful against the Goblins because you can just go and take out a bunch of the small guys. So I very much like having him. The cards that come with this one, there's different things. The Death Grip, and I love this card just because of the picture alone. The Terrifying Revelation, and your target opponent loses 3 morale. Now you need a 6 charisma, but just that the fact that this card is in the deck means they need to kill you as quickly as possible. Adding the Spawn of Kyus, where if they move next to that creature, they'll take damage. You can give vampire things. There's Relentless Advance, so they're just like the Goblins in some sense, where they just keep coming and coming. The Fear, where you can throw creatures back. Very useful with the dragon, basically throwing everybody back away from the dragon. So that's kind of like just a quick rundown of a few of the cards in both of the sets, and 2 more armies to add to this expansion. Okay. The 2 factions are interesting. In fact, I think both of these factions are more interesting than the first 2 that came out with. The only thing is, I would say that I would like to see another hero faction, because we have the one hero faction and we had the other, we had the bad guys, the evil elves, the dark elves, and now we have the goblins and the undead. It'd be nice to see some more good guys. And I'm still using these games mostly as a push into my Wrath of Ashardal and Castle Ravenloft thing. But I do think these add more tactics. I think they have a very different feel. Goblins is fast and furious, get them out there quick, do as much damage as possible. Undead is a little slower but more relentless, and both of these are nice. They feel like you're taking up faster armies against the slower but maybe stronger armies of the original. Of both of these, I do like the Undead army better. I think that's just kind of my style, but I also really like Goblins too. So I actually like both these armies better than the original ones, but that's partially because of my own pre-inclination to like both of these factions. Does the game still have legs? Will we see more expansions? I suspect that we will. I also suspect Wizards of the Coast, being who they are, will stop supporting this game in a few years, but even if they stop supporting it now, people who do like the game have 4 different factions to play with, and you can now actually really deck build if you want, to mix the armies together, to mix the tactics cards together. So you have that option now. I think it's very viable. And I suspect they'll release a couple more armies. So there's enough there to keep it going for a while for people who like it. For me, it's still just a good, slightly above average game. I wouldn't mind a little bit more luck involved in it. Oh, there's the card luck. But I think it is a good system, great models, and I think people who enjoy this game are really going to get a kick out of these 2 expansions.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find the latest board game news at Dicetowernews.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Fun Again Games, the world's best game source. Fun Again Games has over 5,000 games available. Check them out at funagain.com.